Today is a wonderful day. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. I'm Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. We're going to have a really nice conversation with Ian Nieboer, and I mean, he is from Enverus. And as everybody knows, I'm really fond of Enverus. If you got to make a decision, you need data. If you need data, go to Enverus. Now, here's the other thing. We're going to talk ESG, and I love ESG. Ian, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having us.
I've already started off. This is about round 3 of our starting on this. So thanks for being patient.
No worries. It's great that we're getting this done.
Hey, just want to give everybody a shout out. We were at the Enverus Evolve event 2 weeks ago, and it was a blast. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on being in person again, besides not being in COVID.
It was great. I mean, I think we all long for that social and human interaction, and events like that just highlight that over and over again to me. I think the second thing is just seeing how the industry continues to evolve. And I mean, it's puns partially intended, but like to see the spectrum of everything from power and renewables to the importance of sustainability, ESG, to the space, where analytics is taking us within sort of the hydrocarbon and E&P space, and how much has changed in the last couple of years. Like you get together and you really do get this benchmark or timestamp of how far we've come and how much has changed in this period of lockdown and kind of restriction.
There's a lot of things that, boy, I was so appreciative of John and all of the Enverus team just really having fun. I mean, everybody was just excited and was just a lot of fun. But you're the vice president, and when you talk about what are your job, you're up in Canada, and I believe you're up there with Dane as well too, and some of the other folks. Tell us about what you do for Enverus.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've spent most of my time as part of what we would call the intelligence team the last decade or so. So, I mean, our origins are serving institutional clients, corporate clients, trying to sort of help folks understand and navigate the energy space, and what risks they're undertaking, what might be their blind spots, what's changing, what's at the margin. Most recently, that focus is kind of shifted from the conventional E&P and the macro space into how the sustainability and ESG issues are affecting our clients and energy actors in general, and how we can build products on this great SaaS platform to support their evolution and their engagement and ultimate embracing of ESG as a business driver.
Some of the things that are just amazing is I've always felt ESG is critical. I've always felt that, but there's also no ESG without accountability, and technology is changing, isn't it?
It totally is. And we're seeing the accountability on a multiple set of fronts. And I think you're probably thinking about, and a friend of mine right now is like satellite tech and others that lets us inspect emissions, but we're seeing that accountability across that ESG, whether it's on the governance front and profitability and ensuring that these businesses are good, viable, going concern businesses. You're seeing it on the social front and how we relate to our employees and the citizenry and the societies that we participate in. But of course, the environmental and emission stuff is sort of one of those hot topic, front of center horizons as well that we're all very focused on.
Well, when you talk about Enverus and you talk about the data solutions, I mean, it's just like you sit back and take a look at all of the well data, you take a look at all of the electricity data, you talk about power, you got to have the data. And I mean, you guys are fanned out everywhere. What's the breadth of your division looking at ESG? What do you cover? Do you cover all markets?
It's most focused, I think, around that energy space. And so if you think about what we cover from like industry verticals, and you hit it on like P&R, E&P, and the rest, we have almost like a digital twin of the industry, like a great descriptive and predictive analytics set to tell you what's happening and where. And you combine that with these ESG metrics that you can layer on top of it, from point source emitters to rates of change to the S&G performance factors. I think it's kind of like combining all that into a decision space. So if somebody's trying to navigate it, allocate capital, choose where they want to participate, how they want to participate, where the opportunities are. It all kind of comes together. But that's where we're focused. Not to say we won't do more. There's some of these things that extend naturally, but our
Right.
focus is very much across that energy envelope.
So what are some of your key focal points in the next 30 to 60 days that you're looking at?
Key focal points in the next 30 to 60 days. Well, I think we're going to get a little bit more information on the SEC ruling and suggestions of where we're headed there in that sort of very short time horizon. So that's exciting, interesting, likely to be bogged down a little bit with challenge, but something we're keeping a very close eye on. The macro environment and energy security and how things progress, especially with potential sanctions and lockouts of Russian gas and oil, that's going to shape the market and perhaps shift the priority list. And then I think looking at the technology frontier, I mean, even on a 30 and 60-day horizon, like you're getting new things coming out and becoming visible very quickly. Like we heard at Evolve that, what we thought was the top methane tech 30 meter resolution might get replaced and get tested with 7-meter resolution in the next few months here. So it's a lot of different dimensions, and it's probably one of the more exciting times to be in energy.
And one of the things that I just found is blockchain. And being able to track everything through accountability. I heard some of that there, and it was just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another one. If we go to the problem set here, it's chain of custody of something that's already pretty hard to measure with high accuracy, pretty hard to monitor the transactions through the space. So things like blockchain and other technologies that let you see the daisy chain of custody and understand what not just your own ESG profile is, but also the shadow upstream and downstream of your operations might look like.
When you kind of alluded to Russia, and I'm so disgusted with Putin, even though I do a lousy imitation of him. It was more like people were accusing me of sounding like the Sopranos or the Godfather rather than, an evil man, but we'll leave that alone. So when you sit back and take a look at all of the other countries that do not adhere, Canada does a great job with its regulations and trying to produce fossil fuels in the best way possible. They've got some good regulations. They've got some other ones. And then you take a look at the US, we're trying. I mean, there's really some good, they're trying to take care of the environment. It's come a long way with everything. But you look at Saudi Arabia, you look at Iran, you look at Iraq, you look at all these other, Russia, all these other ones around the world, and they do not care about the ESG factor as well, too. Wouldn't you want to buy more oil and energy from folks that are paying attention to the ESG stuff?
Yeah, and I don't want to get too much of like some more ethical arguments. There's certainly, we have a bias that these are important. I mean, energy is important to the quality of life, and responsibly sourcing that is also important and has a huge impact on that quality of life. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect too is like you talked about accountability and transparency and the ability to interrogate what's actually going on. A lot of these areas, it's just sort of like a black box. The absence of information makes it easier to give certain activities a free pass because it's just not visible. And if we think about one of the opportunities I think that comes with it is how do we engage with the various stakeholders that are impacted by the trade-offs of an exploitive industry in a way to say, like, here's what's benefits, here's what the costs are, here's a way that we can actually say that in a sort of an honest, independent, objective way. I think that conversation is going to evolve very quickly as that accountability, as that transparency comes to bear at a global scale. It's not perfect, but I'm hopeful, and I think we're hopeful that the conversations that have been challenging for the industry maybe get a little bit easier because there's sort of a common set of facts to work with.
And so when you're working with ESG, it's going across a lot of the different product sets. For the folks that don't know Enverus, you have a bunch of different products solving a bunch of different problems. So how does the ESG work with all the different products? If you're the vice president of the ESG area, does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess we're all trying to make sense of it.
Oh,
kind of
cool.
think about you think about the world, like I guess there's a bunch of different dimensions we can think about. And
Right,
so a lot of the solutions that we have today are centered around certain cohorts or
right,
problem spaces that make sense. But to your point, like ESG tends to like cross-sect a lot of those
right,
elements. And I think that's where we also see opportunities, like with the breadth of our organization, it really does cover the scope of most energy entities business.
right,
And they're struggling to figure out how to cross boundaries that maybe were, natural boundaries in the past, but now have to be crossed. And so
right.
I think we take it as an opportunity to solve a problem internally that also is a customer problem and an industry problem.
Boy, and it's kind of like when you're measuring CO2 or methane or anything that, excuse me, it really does go across many different energy sectors,
Mhm.
because you'll be upstream, downstream, but you're also going to have electrical, EMP, radiate. You're going to have everything in different areas that the products do need to require methane monitoring or anything else. So how do you recommend standards? There's no standards out there for ESG. So some people can't even spell it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably almost the opposite, where there's a lot of standards. So there's a lot of different rubrics
Right.
out there. And again, the challenge is that there's so many and they're inconsistent. The opportunity is like learning how to engage with those in a productive way. And I think, when we look at one of the big risks or opportunities is that for every entity that has to report or has their own metrics or is going through this process,
Right.
there's going to be 50 other metrics and ways of looking at it that someone else is going to interrogate their business with. And figuring out how to cope with that, you know, that that conversation that's on so many different fronts is
Right.
difficult. And I think where we can provide, a common understanding, and this is something we've done for years in a lot of different spaces, is like, you don't have to think our view is the perfect view, but it's at least an independent and hopefully transparent and neutral view that most people can start their conversation from. And people, we've seen clients and customers base deals on that. Like, it's not my view, it's not their view. It's like, here's a common starting point. I think the ESG space is similar, that if we can be objective and do a good job of the analytics and be transparent of where the flaws and strengths are, maybe that's a place where we can have productive conversations to move forward. And ultimately that's what we're all trying to do, is like, how do we get better? Not necessarily the absolute level, but how do we get better each and every day?
And I just applaud you on that comment, because I love being able to throw that out there and say, hey, here's a starting point. So many times you get into a discussion, there's not even a starting point. It's easier to have a starting point.
Yeah, you got something to negotiate off of from there. And then
Yeah.
all these things are, I think, we're in a world of trade-offs, and what ESG does, as much as
Yep.
anything, I think, is introduce a set of very real trade-offs, but ones that maybe haven't always had to be contemplated,
Right.
or with stakeholders that maybe always haven't had as strong an influence on the decision making. And net that's probably a positive, but it
Right.
makes decision making so much more complex.
And and so everybody has a understanding of environmental in their mind. But governance, how does that portion, because governance can be, how does the company ethically do things to board members and everything else? So how do you look at that part of the ESG?
Oh geez.
That was a fun question.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, if you think about ethically, if I would just distill it, if we step back a little bit further, it's about doing right by your stakeholders. And
Right.
what we're finding, and thematically, is that suite of stakeholders are perhaps more broadly represented than in the past.
Right.
um, and what's right is it's still open a little bit for interpretation, because there are some trade-offs there, but
Yeah.
uh, I think those conversations are getting more objective. And Arjun made a great comment at Evolve too, like, just being profitable as a business, as a board of directors, like, that's part of good governance. But so is ethically sourcing your materials and making sure that
Right.
who your counterparties are, and having the right processes in place. And we've heard in other dimensions, like maybe good governance just means that you've got the right process to pay on time and to be able to actually respond and answer quickly and accurately with what's going on inside your organization when there is a quick criticism or question. So there's just so many dimensions depending on who the stakeholder is. I think we can get at it and measure it, but net, this is leading to professionalizing and improving the way we operate these businesses.
Yeah, and you always sit back and kind of wonder how politicians go in poor and everybody comes out rich. So we need to get governance somehow into our political structures. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that one alone. That's supposed to be a little bit of Friday humor for everybody. But if you want to get rich, be a politician, I guess is the only way to really say that. But let's get back to ESG. When you take a look at your next year, so we've come a long way, Ian, in this past year. I mean, it's really, like you said, it's really teed up. What are your plans for next year?
I mean, it's a place that we're focused and we're investing heavily on. And so you could point to probably at least 3 different dimensions.
Okay.
So one horizon is just around what we'd call ESG analytics. The foundation of that is publicly sourced data, so disclosures, what's visible through sort of remote detection, et cetera. And this lets you benchmark and have a common understanding of the landscape. It's really, really valuable when you tie it up with the rest of our product slate, and that's where a lot of decision makers kind of look. So that's one. The second one that we're going to do, and we are starting to do a lot more of, is looking at sort of the internal operational pieces. So we've got a great business automation business that sees about 60% of North American E&P spend flow through that network. But when you're tracking dollars in that sort of customer proprietary data set, there's a lot of things we can marry with that and help you understand and explore your environmental footprint and your governance procedures, and just how the dollars flow alongside the sort of customer proprietary data. So that's a big bucket of area that we'll do and are doing a lot more of over the next year. And then the third is just thinking about that carbon economy, and that we can look at energy on a bunch of different bases, from a dollar an energy or molecule basis, but also on a carbon or emissions profile. And given the degree of pricing and taxation and incentives around that, there's a whole sub ecosystem there that creates opportunities, but also real costs into these organizations. So we'll do a lot more there too.
You brought up a great point, and that is, that is so many of your counterparts at Enverus have a product to sell. A product is a lot easier than a thought process, or, the ESG product itself is not really, it's not as easy to sell, is it?
I don't know. I would challenge that. I think that, ESG as a theme has multiple sort of products through it. Right. We certainly have a couple different quote unquote ESG products in the market that are doing really well and influence different things. But kind of backing up to your view is like, it is a workflow, it is a process, and I think the entire Enverus organization is really built around, let's understand what those big workflows are and how do we provide that sort of fulcrum element in that process that's really hard or really valuable or would be best achieved at scale, or sort of some sort of consistency that we can do uniquely. And I think ESG is no different. Like, we're not going to try and do every single thing in that process, but we're probably able to do some things that really impact our clients in a way they would never do on their own, and in the way that our competitors just simply can't.
I'm going to also ask, and I'll tell you, this has been really, really cool. But what are some of your personal goals for next year?
Personal goals. I think there's a couple. In each of those 3 big buckets, make sure that the product evolution we can point to like a really tangible step. And that tangible step is both, yes, we want market success, but I think to really be able to articulate and explain and illustrate with more examples than we have today, that this is better business. This is a way that drives profitability and allows you to differentiate how your business operates within a larger commodity environment. we really believe that's the possibility and potential of adopting this. It's not just about ESG, it's about
Nice.
improving your business. And I think on, both your analytics side as well as your business automation side, like there's some really big and obvious things we can do. And I hope a year from now, they look obvious to others.
I'll tell you what a great answer, Ian. I'll tell you, that was first I thought you were going to fall off of your chair there. I hope I didn't
I
surprise you.
hadn't thought too much about my goals for the next year, but I hadn't had to say it quite as distinctly as that.
Oh, you did great. I was like, man, that's a good one. And that was an outstanding answer back. So thank you very much. And Ian, I'll tell you, thank you for taking time to stop by our podcast today. I had an absolute blast, and I'm going to have to bug you again to see you again when we check in on your changes or any updates there for you.
Please do. We really appreciate the time and always enjoy conversations like this. This was super fun.
Sounds great.